Please pray with me. Incarnate God, we ask that you once again take the Word and transform it to a living, breathing reality we all can experience together. Be present here in this time and in these words, God, for if you are present here, then nothing else will matter. But if you are not present here, then nothing else will matter. In the name of the Creator, the Christ, and the Comforter. Amen. Last Sunday night, I attended Blake's first piano recital. The teacher began the recital with a simple introduction of all the students, and then she announced that during this year's recital, it was going to be different than any other recital she had ever done before. Previously, she had never allowed any student to play the same song that another student had played because she didn't want the students to be comparing themselves to one another, but that she changed her rules this year because she wanted us as parents to experience the progression as students took more and more lessons and went further in their piano careers. So during the recital, we were going to hear the holiday classic Silver Bells 3 different times. The first time it was played by my niece, Madison. It was a simple arrangement. This is her second year of piano. So it was a bit beyond the simple 5-finger arrangement. There was some very basic left-hand accompaniment, while the right hand played the melody that all of us know so well. The second time the song was performed, it was by a slightly older student, and the arrangement was just a little more complex. There was a little bit of independence of hands, yet they were playing different but still compatible rhythms. The students used the pedal just a little bit. The third time the song was performed, it was by one of the older students in the recital. There was more rhythmic complexities. There were shorter notes in the arrangements, 8th notes, 16th notes. Then the student used the pedal throughout the entire piece. The progression could have continued because there exist more difficult arrangements of Silver Bells that are worked into more complex and classical arrangements that are performed in huge concert halls by world-renowned artists during the holiday season. The same song progressing, changing, being given new life at every level. However, it's important to note that the melody, those 8 bars, that's what makes Silver Bells, Silver Bells. That's exactly what happens in our text this morning, our Christmas anthem of sorts. A melody drives it forward for us. The first verse that we encountered this morning came from the book of Isaiah. It's the text that Stephen read over us earlier in the service. Now, in case you have forgotten, this text takes place during the Syro-Ephraimite conflict of 734-733 BCE. And just in case you have forgotten the details of that conflict, King Ahaz reigns in Jerusalem. However, there is opposition on the way. 2 other kings have plans to invade Jerusalem, and they want to replace King Ahaz with a puppet ruler who will do whatever they say, namely support the coalition against Assyria and further their own state's wealth and power. Now, I know this is ancient history, and it's quite difficult of us to think of a world where a nation or state might try to deeply influence another country's position of power with a ruler who will further the original country's wealth and power. I know it's hard to imagine that, but I'm going to ask you to do that this morning, because if that happened, it would be a terrifying time. Now, King Ahaz and all of Jerusalem, they're terrified of the coming invasion for many reasons. First, the other armies are bigger and stronger, so the invasion is going to be successful. Second, this invasion will deeply impact their own survival. Lives will be lost. Land will be lost. And then third, they truly believed that their salvation depended on a descendant of King David sitting on the throne. And this would end that. So if they were conquered, they would lose the things that mattered most to them: the temple, the land, the king. So they're afraid because the world as they know it is about to change. And it's into that world that prophet Isaiah speaks a bold truth to the king. and to all of Jerusalem as a sign of hope. It's in the king's time of deep fear and uncertainty that the words of a prophet bring divine protection and salvation. Look at the young woman with child. She's going to have a son. She will name him Emmanuel. And by the time the child is 12 years old, he will know good from evil. And by then the threat of war will be over, because those two kings that you're fretting over, they will be ancient history. And this prophecy comes to pass. The land is not destroyed by these two kings, and Ahaz reigns longer. In fact, he reigns for almost 2 more decades, and he has a prominent role in the lineage of Jesus. Do you hear the melody this morning as it begins? Look at the young woman pregnant with child. She is going to have a son. She will name him Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us. It's God's very covenant to redeem this world from the inside out. And to be honest, it's so frustratingly ambiguous. But the truth is, we're not asked to understand it. We're asked to trust it. To believe the promise that can sustain us. God is with us. The melody plays on. Our second scripture this morning, the one that Deborah just read, again, it's a text that takes place in dark times, in political upheaval, in times of uncertainty, in times of exhaustion, and in times of fear. And not only is the world in a precarious position, this text brings us into a family in a precarious position. Mary and Joseph are engaged. And that means more than it means in our world today, where engagements are times of preparation and showers and picking the right color napkins for the table. Engagements back then were the beginning of marriage. The covenant has already been made, but the couple is not yet living together. Mary and Joseph are engaged, and then Mary has to come to Joseph with news that is not exactly what anyone wants to hear. I'm pregnant, and the baby isn't yours. So what is Joseph to do? He knows the law. He knows the tradition. He knows what's supposed to be done. But he loves Mary too much to disgrace her. He loves Mary too much to shame her. And it's there. It's in that place that the Lord shows up again and speaks to him and offers him a sign of divine protection, a sign of salvation. Look at the young woman. You're betrothed with child. She will bear a son, and his name will be Emmanuel. And he will save the world. So don't be afraid. Don't divorce her. Don't leave her. Take her as your wife, because you too have a role in this story. It's the melody playing one more time. Look at the young woman pregnant with child. She's going to have a son. She's going to name him Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us. It's God's very covenant to redeem this world from the inside out. And to be honest, it's so frustratingly ambiguous, but we're not asked to understand it. We're asked to trust it, to believe this promise that will sustain us. God is with us. And our third text this morning, we haven't read it yet because we're currently living it. This is the text that each of us brings to this place this morning. It's the sacred text of our very lives, the story of God and you, the story of God and me. It's not written down yet because we are still living it, and it's unfolding around us. And this text has so many elements of the previous two texts. There are so many parallels to be found, because here in this space, in this sanctuary this morning, there are those of us who are scared and fearful. And there are those of us who are uncertain as to what is next. There are those of us dealing with what feels like a betrayal. There are those of us in grief over what has not come to pass and what has come to pass. And there are those of us wrestling with very real doubts and struggling because we can't control the things that we want to control. There's a fear of losing privilege. We collectively bring all of that into this space this morning, into the text of our life today. And so I wonder this morning if what we need is to simply be quiet. If at the start of a week that is going to be so full and is going to be so loud, it's going to be so wonderfully joyous for some of us and so difficult for others of us. If we need to start this week in silence, to see if we can hear the prophet's voice calling forth again, to see if we can hear that melody playing. You see, one of the things I walked away from the recital the other night thinking about was what makes Silver Bells. Silver Bells is those 8 bars. What it's all about is the melody. It doesn't matter what else you put around it. Pedals, different rhythms, 8th notes, 16th notes. Whatever you do, even if you blend it into a bigger piece, it's Silver Bells because the melody that we all know by heart. There is a lot of noise around us this year. And some of it's good noise and some of it's distracting and negative noise. Both are present. But what I truly believe is that if we would all lean in this year and listen, we would hear our Christmas melody playing once again. Look at the young woman, pregnant with child. She is going to have a son, and she will name him Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us. It's God's very covenant to redeem this world from the inside out. And to be honest, it is still so frustratingly ambiguous, but we're not asked to understand it. We're asked to trust it, to believe the promise that can sustain us. God is with us. It's the same melody that God's been playing year after year after year. And thank God that King Ahaz was wise enough to let a prophet speak. You know, he didn't have to let the prophet speak. Instead, he could have called in military advisors and planned for an attack that would have been doomed from the start. But he fought his gut reaction of preparing for battle, and instead he called in a prophet. And then he trusted the words of that prophet. He trusted the melody of God. And thank God for Joseph, who was brave enough to trust a dream and to let the word of the Lord be born in his heart. And instead of calling a divorce attorney, and instead of trying to set up his own future, instead he rests. And he allows the Lord to speak. And he receives the word of the Lord and he trusts it. He trusted the melody of God. Can we do the same thing today? Could we allow the words to be spoken over us? Look at the young woman pregnant with child. She's going to have a son. She will name him Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us. It's God's very covenant to redeem this world from the inside out. And to be honest, it's so frustratingly ambiguous, but we're not asked to understand it. We're asked to trust it. God is with us. Because I don't think the melody has changed. The same melody that God gave to Ahaz, God gave to Joseph, God is giving to us. Emmanuel, God with us. Ahaz heard it, he believed it, and the world was saved. Joseph heard it, Joseph believed it, and the world was saved. We have heard it. The question now is, do we believe it? And if we do, what is God going to birth out of that belief? I'm not sure, but I have a hunch that is where peace, that is where wholeness will be found, because that is the only place they can be found. Emmanuel, God with us. Amen and amen.